The galactic rim was a chaotic expanse, a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and alien species that thrived in the shadows of its uncharted systems. The air crackled with tension, a realm where danger and opportunity intertwined. Among them was Tashora, a Velan Dominator, renowned for her razor-sharp cunning and hypnotic beauty. Her species, capable of extraordinary telepathic prowess, could effortlessly manipulate the wills of others. The Velan's mental dominance was a weapon and a shield. Tashora's abilities were unparalleled, and she wielded them like a scalpel. Humans, in particular, were seen as little more than a nuisance, an inferior species scuttling at the fringes of galactic significance. But Tashora had heard unsettling whispers of a human, who had resisted her kind's powers. The thought intrigued and infuriated her. Such defiance was an affront to Velan pride. The bounty on his capture was astronomical, enough to pull Tashora from the opulent safety of Valara Prime. She leaned forward as her holoconsole projected the image of her target. Commander Dax Corrin, a former soldier turned mercenary, radiated a quiet confidence in the hologram. His piercing green eyes stared directly into the lens, unflinching, daring. Even through the static, there was an energy about him, a magnetism Tashora couldn't ignore. Her sleek starship, the Ebon Shard, descended through the dense atmosphere of Zelvaris 7. The jungle moon was a world of thick, humid air and towering trees, their canopies blotting out the twin suns. Dax had been spotted here last, and every credit she had spent on informants pointed to the ruins deep within the jungle. Tashora disembarked, the heat pressing against her like a heavy cloak. Her enforcers, clad in matte black armor, moved silently at her flanks. Their plasma rifles gleamed under the muted red light filtering through the canopy. Despite their presence, Tashora felt no need for them. Dax would succumb to her will, just like the others. The jungle's sounds enveloped them, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant roar of unseen creatures. Yet, as they neared the ruins, the ambient noise began to fade. The silence wasn't natural, it was oppressive, as though the jungle itself conspired against them. "Stay sharp," Tashora ordered, her voice low but commanding. Reaching out with her telepathic senses, she searched for Dax's mind. What she found instead was an unsettling absence, a void that resisted her probing. It was as if something or someone was actively concealing his presence. Her brow furrowed, and for the first time in years, doubt began to creep in. Suddenly, a piercing scream broke the silence. One of her enforcers, a veteran soldier, collapsed, his cry cut short by the sickening crunch of bone. The others spun, weapons raised, their movements frantic. But the jungle offered no target. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, shrouding whatever predator lurked within them. Tashora clenched her fists, her anger sharpening her focus. This was no accident. "Dax Corrin," she called out, amplifying her voice with a sonic modulator. "You can't hide forever. Show yourself, and I might consider sparing your life." A response came, but not in words. From above, a figure dropped, landing with the silent grace of a predator. Dax Corrin. He blended seamlessly with the jungle, his combat gear worn but functional, his movements fluid. The rifle in his hands snapped up, aimed with precision, and fired. One of Tashora's enforcers dropped, a clean shot to the chest. "I'm not hiding," Dax said, his voice calm, almost mocking. He moved like a shadow, disappearing into the underbrush before anyone could return fire. "But you should be." Tashora's lips curled into a dangerous smile. "You think you can win this," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Explosions erupted around her as hidden traps activated. Trees splintered, flames erupted, and the air was filled with shrapnel and chaos. Her enforcers fell one by one, their attempts to fight back swallowed by the calculated precision of Dax's ambush. Plasma bolts lit up the jungle, but they hit nothing but shadows. When the dust settled, Tashora stood alone in the clearing. Her sleek armor bore scorch marks, her hair disheveled, but her resolve unbroken. Reaching out with her mind, she targeted Dax directly. She could feel him now, his presence sharp and focused. His thoughts were unlike any she had encountered, fortified, resilient. With a surge of power, she attempted to breach his mental defenses. But she hit a wall. His mind wasn't just strong, it was a fortress. Layers of willpower repelled her attempts, reflecting her power back at her. The effort left her momentarily stunned. She had dominated minds across the galaxy, but this was something else. "Nice try," Dax said, stepping into view. He'd lowered his rifle, though his stance remained guarded. There was a confidence in his gaze that made her stomach twist, not in fear, but in something unsettlingly close to admiration. "You're an anomaly," Tashora said, regaining her composure. "What makes you different?" Dax smirked. "Just a man," he said, his tone light but edged with steel. "But if you're so curious, you'll have to try harder than that." Her frustration was matched only by her intrigue. She'd never faced anyone who could resist her so completely. The hunt, it seemed, had taken an unexpected turn. "The game isn't over," Tashora said, raising her chin. Her voice carried both a promise and a warning. Dax tilted his head, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "No," he agreed. "It's just beginning." With that, he vanished into the jungle once more, leaving her alone in the clearing. But Tashora didn't feel defeated. If anything, she was exhilarated. The challenge was unlike any she had faced before, and she wasn't one to back down. What she didn't yet realize was that her pursuit of Dax would unravel more than just his secrets. It would change her in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The jungle's darkness deepened as the twin suns of Zelvaris 7 dipped below the horizon, their crimson light fading into the gloom. Tashora stood alone amidst the carnage of her failed assault team, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. The air was thick with smoke and the faint scent of burned foliage, mingling with the sharp tang of ozone from plasma discharges. But her mind wasn't on the fallen. It was on him. Dax Corran. The anomaly. The man who had resisted her. She clenched her jaw, her sharp nails digging into her palms. There was something infuriatingly compelling about his defiance. She had faced challenges before, but none so unshakable. And yet, a part of her couldn't suppress the exhilaration that coursed through her veins. As night blanketed the jungle, her surroundings seemed to come alive with sounds, chittering creatures, rustling leaves, distant roars. It was as if the moon itself was testing her resolve. But Tashora was Velan, and Velans never yielded. She knelt beside one of her fallen enforcers, retrieving a small, palm-sized device from his belt. It emitted a faint blue glow as she activated it, projecting a detailed map of the ruins ahead. The holographic display shimmered, showing ancient stone corridors entwined with roots and vines. Her lips curved into a determined smile. Dax had fled deeper into the ruins. He was cornered, whether he realized it or not. "You can't run forever," she murmured, rising to her feet. The jungle seemed to mock her with its silence. Inside the ruins, Dax moved with practiced ease, his steps silent as a shadow. The ancient corridors stretched endlessly, their walls carved with intricate alien symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. He glanced over his shoulder, his sharp eyes scanning the path he'd taken. He knew Tashora wouldn't give up, not after what she'd already lost. The Velan was relentless, but so was he. A faint hum drew his attention to a chamber ahead. Its entrance was partially collapsed, vines dangling like a curtain over its threshold. Carefully, Dax slipped inside, his rifle at the ready. The room was vast, its walls covered in glowing glyphs that pulsed rhythmically, as if alive. At its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline artifact that emitted a faint, otherworldly light. Dax approached cautiously, his instincts screaming at him to be wary. He'd seen enough ancient tech in his time to know that artifacts like this rarely came without a cost. Still, something about the artifact felt significant. He couldn't explain it, but the longer he stared at it, the more it seemed to pull at him, as though whispering secrets just beyond his comprehension. Tashora's footsteps echoed softly as she entered the ruins, her senses on high alert. She could feel Dax's presence now, faint but unmistakable. The mental void that had shielded him earlier was still there, but it was thinner, as if the ruins themselves were amplifying her telepathic reach. Her pulse quickened. Whatever lay within these walls, it was ancient and powerful, and it was aiding her in ways she didn't understand. Her fingers brushed against the carvings on the walls, their faint glow pulsing in response to her touch. She felt a strange resonance, a hum in the back of her mind that seemed to align with her thoughts. It was unsettling and thrilling all at once. For the first time in years, she felt uncertain not of her abilities, but of what she was stepping into. She pressed forward, her pace quickening as the faint traces of Dax's mind became clearer. He was close. Dax's fingers hovered inches from the artifact when he heard it, the faintest whisper of movement behind him. Without turning, he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Took you long enough." Tashora stepped into the chamber, her silhouette framed by the glowing glyphs. Her eyes locked onto him, then shifted to the artifact. For a moment, neither spoke, the tension between them crackling like a live wire. "You have a knack for making things difficult," she said, her tone sharp but laced with grudging respect. Dax smirked, finally turning to face her. "And you have a knack for underestimating humans." Her gaze narrowed. "You're not like other humans. And you're not like other Velans." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Tashora's fingers twitched at her side, and Dax noticed the faint glow of her telepathic energy building. His smirk faded, replaced by a steely resolve. "Don't," he warned. "Why not?" she countered, stepping closer. "Afraid you can't resist me again? Afraid you'll regret trying." Their standoff was interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the chamber. The glyphs on the walls flared brighter, their glow pulsating in time with the artifact. Both Tashora and Dax instinctively took a step back as the artifact's light intensified, casting the room in an ethereal brilliance. "What did you do?" Tashora demanded, her voice edged with accusation. Dax raised an eyebrow. "Me? You're the one who barged in." Before she could respond, the artifact emitted a high-pitched hum that escalated into a deafening crescendo. A wave of energy erupted from it, knocking them both to the ground. When the light faded, the chamber was eerily quiet, save for the sound of their labored breathing. Tashora was the first to rise, her eyes darting to the artifact. It no longer glowed, its crystalline surface now dull and lifeless. But something had changed. She could feel it in the air, in her mind. The resonance she'd felt earlier was stronger now, almost overwhelming. Dax groaned, pushing himself up onto one elbow. "Well, that was new." She rounded on him, her frustration boiling over. "What did you do to it?" "I didn't touch it," he shot back, his voice as sharp as hers. "Whatever that thing is, it's way beyond either of us." Tashora opened her mouth to argue but stopped. She could sense the truth in his words. Whatever had happened, it wasn't his doing, at least, not entirely. Her eyes narrowed as she studied him, a new thought creeping into her mind. "You've been here before," she said, her voice softer now, almost accusing. "Haven't you?" Dax hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. "Maybe," he admitted. "Why?" "Same reason as you," he said, standing fully now. "Answers." The glyphs on the walls began to glow again, but this time their light was softer, steadier. The chamber felt alive, aware. Both of them felt it, the undeniable sense that they were being watched not by a person, but by something ancient and unfathomable. "I think we just woke it up," Dax said, his voice low. Tashora's gaze flicked to the walls, then back to him. For the first time, she felt a pang of something she couldn't name. Not fear, exactly, but something close. She hated it. And yet, as she stared at Dax, she realized she might need him more than she cared to admit. "Then we'd better figure out what it wants," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Dax nodded, his smirk returning. "Now you're starting to think like a human." She shot him a glare but didn't respond. For now, they were stuck together, bound by forces neither fully understood. And as the glyph's light pulsed rhythmically around them, both couldn't shake the feeling that their hunt was far from over. The glyph's pulsating light filled the chamber, casting an otherworldly glow across the ancient walls. The air was thick with an electric hum, a tangible reminder that the artifact had stirred something far beyond their comprehension. Tashora's sharp eyes darted from the glowing symbols to Dax, who stood a few feet away, his posture as calm as ever despite the escalating tension. "This place is alive," she muttered under her breath, half to herself and half to him. Her voice betrayed none of the unease tightening in her chest. "You're just now figuring that out?" Dax replied, his tone light but tinged with a quiet seriousness. His gaze was fixed on the glyphs, his expression unreadable. These ruins aren't just a relic of some ancient civilization. They're something more. Something sentient. Tashora's jaw tightened. She hated that he always seemed a step ahead, even in a situation as unpredictable as this. If you know so much, why don't you enlighten me? She snapped, her irritation breaking through her measured tone. Dax finally turned to face her, his green eyes steady. I don't know everything, he admitted, his voice quieter now. But I've been here before. I've felt this presence. Whatever it is, it's not something you can control. Her eyes narrowed, her pride bristling at his implication. Everything can be controlled, she said, her voice low and dangerous. That's your problem, Dax replied, his words cutting. You think everything is a game of dominance. This isn't about you. It's about survival. Before Tashora could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered. The glyphs' glow intensified, their light coalescing into streams that flowed across the walls like liquid fire. Both of them instinctively stepped back, their eyes fixed on the spectacle. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, not in words but in a vibration that thrummed in their minds. Who disturbs my slumber? Tashora staggered under the weight of the presence invading her thoughts. It was vast, ancient, and utterly overwhelming. She glanced at Dax, expecting to see him similarly affected, but to her shock, he stood firm, his expression resolute. We didn't come to disturb, Dax said aloud, his voice steady and clear. We came for answers. The presence seemed to focus on him, its intensity sharp enough to make Tashora's knees buckle. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to remain upright. You carry the mark, the voice said, directed at Dax. You have been here before. Why do you return? Dax hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. Because I still don't understand what you are. The presence's laughter echoed in their minds, a sound that was neither cruel nor kind. Understanding is a burden few can bear. Are you prepared to face it? Dax nodded, his determination unwavering. Yes. The light in the chamber shifted, centering on the artifact at the pedestal. Its crystalline surface shimmered, projecting an intricate, three-dimensional map of the galaxy into the air. The stars and planets glowed softly, their positions constantly shifting as though alive. Your kind seeks control, the voice said, addressing both of them now. But control is an illusion. The threads of existence are too vast, too intertwined. You would be wise to abandon such pursuits. Tashora's fists clenched. And what would you have us do? She demanded, her voice trembling with equal parts anger and fear. Learn, the voice replied. Adapt. Survive. The map zoomed in, focusing on a cluster of stars near the galactic core. One planet pulsed with a vivid red light. Your fates are tied to this world, the presence continued. What you choose to do there will determine whether you thrive or perish. Before either of them could ask more, the map dissolved, the glyphs glow dimming. The chamber felt suddenly hollow, as though the ancient presence had withdrawn. Tashora's legs gave out, and she dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. Dax moved to her side, offering a steadying hand. She hesitated, glaring at him, but ultimately accepted his help. What was that? She rasped, her voice hoarse. A warning, Dax said grimly. And maybe an opportunity. Tashora's pride flared, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Whatever this force was, it had power far beyond anything she'd encountered. And she couldn't face it alone. The journey back through the ruins was marked by an uneasy truce. Tashora kept her distance, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet answer. Who was Dax Corrin, really? And why did he seem to resonate with this ancient force in a way she couldn't? Her telepathic abilities, so reliable in other situations, faltered when she tried to probe him. His mind was still an impenetrable wall, and it frustrated her to no end. For his part, Dax remained quiet, his expression thoughtful. He led them with practiced ease, navigating the ruins as though he'd walked them 100 times. It wasn't until they emerged back into the jungle, the cool night air washing over them, that he finally spoke. That planet, he said, breaking the silence. Do you know it? Tashora shook her head. No. But I'll find out. Dax nodded. We'll find out, he corrected, his tone leaving no room for argument. Her eyes narrowed. You think I need you? I think we need each other, he replied evenly. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than either of us. You felt it too, didn't you? She didn't respond immediately, her pride warring with the undeniable truth. Finally, she gave a curt nod. Fine, she said. But don't think for a second that this makes us equals. Dax's smirk returned. Wouldn't dream of it. They set off through the jungle, their uneasy alliance forged in the crucible of the ruins. Neither trusted the other fully, but both understood the stakes. And as the stars above shifted slowly, casting their light on the dense foliage, both knew their paths were now irrevocably intertwined. The jungle's dense foliage thinned as Tashora and Dax made their way toward the extraction point. The silence between them was weighted, not with animosity, but with the gravity of what they had experienced. Above them, the stars shimmered with indifferent brilliance, their distant light a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Yet, Tashora couldn't shake the feeling that what they had uncovered in the ruins was anything but insignificant. The ship's outline emerged through the trees, its sleek, dark form a beacon of technology amidst the primal wildness. Tashora paused just before the clearing, her gaze fixed on Dax. For the first time, she allowed herself to study him without the veil of competition or suspicion. He stood there, calm and resolute, his green eyes reflecting a quiet determination that had, against all odds, earned her respect. We'll go to the coordinates, she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of a decision she never thought she'd make. But once this is over, we go our separate ways. Dax turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. Fair enough, he said. But I'll remind you that nothing ever really ends cleanly in this galaxy. She didn't respond, choosing instead to stride toward the ship. Dax followed, his footsteps light but purposeful. They boarded the vessel, the ramp hissing closed behind them, and within moments, the engines roared to life. The jungle disappeared beneath them as the ship ascended, leaving behind the ruins and their enigmatic presence. The journey to the coordinates was uneventful, the silence in the cockpit broken only by the occasional hum of the ship's systems. The red-marked planet loomed ahead, its surface an angry swirl of volcanic activity and dense, storm-laden clouds. It was a world that seemed hostile to life, yet both of them knew it held answers they couldn't ignore. The landing was rough, the ship jostled by powerful winds and sudden bursts of ash from the volatile surface. When they finally touched down, the ground beneath them rumbled ominously, as if the planet itself resented their presence. Ready? Dax asked, glancing at Tashora as he adjusted his gear. She nodded, her expression grim but resolute. Let's finish this. The trek across the planet's surface was arduous, the air thick with heat and the acrid stench of sulfur. Yet, as they neared the location marked by the artifact's map, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lighten, as though they were stepping into a sanctuary hidden amidst the chaos. Before them stood a massive structure, carved from black stone and adorned with the same glowing glyphs they'd seen in the ruins. This is it, Dax said, his voice low. Tashora reached out, her fingers brushing against the glyphs on the entrance. The stone felt warm under her touch, and as she pushed, the door groaned open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in soft, golden light. At its center stood a pedestal, similar to the one in the jungle ruins, but this time the artifact atop it pulsed with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. As they stepped inside, the presence returned, enveloping them in its vast, incomprehensible awareness. Tashora's knees buckled, and for a moment, she felt as though she were falling into an endless abyss. But then, she felt something else, Dax's hand on her arm, steadying her. You're not alone, he said quietly. The words were simple, but they anchored her. The presence's voice filled the chamber, resonating in their minds. You have come seeking answers. Yet answers are not what you need. What you seek is balance. Tashora frowned. Balance? Between what? Between control and understanding, the voice replied. Your strength lies not in domination, but in connection. Together, you are more than the sum of your parts. But divided, you will destroy yourselves and others. The artifact glowed brighter, projecting images into the air. They saw visions of the galaxy in turmoil, wars, destruction, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. But interspersed were moments of unity, where disparate forces came together to create something greater. The contrast was stark, the message unmistakable. Tashora's throat tightened. All her life, she had relied on her ability to control, to dominate. It was the Velan way. But here, in this moment, she saw the limits of that approach. The Presence's words weren't just a warning, they were an invitation to grow beyond what she had been. You must choose, the voice said. Will you cling to the illusion of control, or will you embrace the truth of connection? Tashora glanced at Dax, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She thought of their uneasy alliance, the way he had defied her and yet stood by her when it mattered. Slowly, she nodded. I choose connection, she said, her voice steady. The artifact's light pulsed, and the presence seemed to recede, leaving them alone in the chamber. But the change was palpable. Tashora felt lighter, as though a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. Back on the ship, the silence between them was different now, not strained, but comfortable. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere and into the vastness of space, Tashora turned to Dax. You're insufferable, you know that, she said, but there was no venom in her words. Dax chuckled. And you're impossible. But I'll take that as a compliment. She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time, she allowed herself to see him not as an adversary, but as an equal. Someone who had challenged her, not out of malice, but out of necessity. As the stars stretched before them, endless and full of promise, Tashora realized that the galaxy was vast enough for more than one perspective. And in that vastness, there was room for growth for both of them. The ship disappeared into the expanse, leaving behind a planet forever changed by their choices. And as they ventured toward whatever came next, Tashora found herself thinking that perhaps, just perhaps, connection was the greatest strength of all.